We do have time for some questions, so I know we've got the 3 GSA team here, but could we also bring back up Angus, Garrett and Peter Kershaw, and we'll do questions in the round if that's okay. We might need a few more chairs, so do you want to bring a chair with you, Angus? Okay, so any questions from the audience to any of the panel speakers from this session? Well, I've got one to get us started with Peter. Peter, really pleased to hear that there's no concern from the impact of microplastics on seafood consumption. Has there been much research on potential cumulative impacts? Because obviously seafood, unfortunately, isn't the only food product that we eat. So do we need to be aware of the broader picture here?
Yeah, thanks. I think you do. The caveat with that study is that it was based on existing knowledge, and the existing knowledge base is pretty poor. And one of the things we don't know anything about is when you start getting down into nano-sized materials, because we have no way of measuring it in the field. So the assumption is, though, that even if you stopped all the plastics getting into the ocean tomorrow, there's still a huge reservoir of plastics there, which are just going to break. If they break down at all, they'll break down into smaller and smaller pieces. They stay as plastics. They hang around. They can absorb stuff that's already out there, like some of the legacy pollutants, DDT, so forth, PCBs, which are still out there, and some of these new ones we keep inventing, because we keep inventing new chemicals by the thousand every year. So there's that aspect. There's the other aspect of, in terms of fish health, it's another stressor they don't need, along with all the other stresses which they're getting. So any time you put an extra stressor on the system, whether it's to a whole stock because you're capturing more than you should be because of the derelict gear, or whether you're having some other impact, potentially some of these chemicals are endocrine disruptors, which means they can interfere with the reproductive cycle. There's an interest in we produce a lot of endocrine disrupting chemicals, and plastics may be one extra vector for getting them into the system. So I think you have to try and look at this in the round. You have to try and look at this as one stressor on the system, on the fish stocks, one potential stressor for human consumption, but then put it in perspective. My fear is you get a perception of a problem, and that can be much more important for an industry than an actual science health problem. It's the perception that you have a problem, and I think that's why you have to look at it, see it's a legitimate question to ask, and then know how you deal with it. Dealing with cumulative problems is absolutely the right way to go. We don't have the tools at the moment in terms of risk assessment to do it very well, but people are now working on that, because it's no good just looking at this risk, this risk, this risk, this risk, when you have a whole number, and you never know whether they're cumulative, whether they're synergistic, So I think in 5 years' time, if you have someone else talking about this topic, we'll know a bit more about it.
Thank you, Peter. Any further questions from the floor? Over to, yes, Bertie.
Thank you very much, Aoife. Yeah, actually, Peter de-stung the question by his, says Bertie Armstrong, Chief Executive of the Scottish Fishermen's Federation. Hi, Bill. You're clearly spotlit there. You de-stung the question by your final comments. There was a study done by DEFRA, or sponsored by DEFRA, in March this year in plastics in the ocean. And a sense of proportion is really very important here. The 20% of the pollution in the ocean, of the plastics pollution, comes from marine-based inputs. The other 80 comes from other sources. So we shouldn't raise the anxiety level through the roof about what we're doing. And under chemo and a number of other initiatives, we are certainly getting better. When I first went to sea a very long time ago, everything went over the side when you were outside the 3-mile limit. We are 1 million miles from that now for the amount of marine-based pollution. Actually, with regard to microplastics, the biggest problem is tire particles. By a country mile, the biggest problem is tire particles washed off the roads into the oceans. Thank you.
Thank you, Bertie. Any further questions? Yes, down here on my left. Thanks, Julie.
I was just wondering what percentage of shrimp farms are BAP approved, and how often are they audited or visited, and is it announced or unannounced?
And I'm going to let Wally answer that. Where are you, Wally?
About 5%. 5, that's it. Shrimp is such a diverse production chain in developing countries that between the Aquaculture Stewardship Council, the BAP program, we might touch 7%. We got a long way to go with shrimp. And those certifications take place on an annual basis every year.
And are they announced or unannounced, or is there any visits that they're just random to see if they are still keeping up with standard?
So the audits are organised. One of the differences that we have is that we name the auditors that are going in to do those audits, which is a little bit different to normal. And it also means that you can get more efficiencies, because where we know they're happening, we can cluster some of those audits and so on. But on an annual basis, so pretty frequently. But that's on the shrimp.
Thank you. Any further hands going up out there? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much indeed, panel. Really informative session. Lots of diversity in the presentations, everything from supply trends through to plastics in the ocean, through to standards, and providing that consumer reassurance that they need. So can I just for one last time ask you to say a big thank you to our 5 panel speakers. Thank you.